Well, it was quite a week for clashes and violence and all sorts of mayhem. And I don't just mean in North Africa. What about in Glasgow, where the fifth Old Firm game of the season, plumbed more or less new depths. Certainly in the 50 years that I have been conscious of Rangers and Celtic games and their importance, this is probably the pits. Maybe Hugh Dallas being struck by a coin was worse. Maybe it was not as bad. The situation was this. 187 people were arrested, 34 at the game itself, which was considerably less actually than at the previous Old Firm game, though the numbers multiplied when you start to take into account the offences that took place away from the ground and even when people got back home. And for the games this season, including police costs, hospital costs and everything else, it's been claimed, though I personally think this figure is bunkum, but it's been claimed by reputable sources that it's cost the public £40 million. Anyway, whatever it cost, players and fans and managers are going to have to take a hard look at themselves, because there's going to be a summit convened by Scotland's First Minister involving the clubs, the Scottish Football Association and the Scottish Executive, because, well, it just can't be allowed to escalate in the way that it has. Let me put my own cards on the table. I am a Celtic supporter. I am from Irish immigrant stock. The Celtic-Rangers rivalry is rooted in the dichotomy in Scottish society between the quote-unquote indigenous Scottish Protestant population and the quote-unquote Irish Catholic immigrant population. Each had its own football club at roughly the same time, getting on for 120 years ago. And, I'm afraid that in that 120 years, though some things have changed, many things have not. It cannot, as Danny Kelly was just pointing out to me as he was leaving, be the case that Celtic and Rangers is purely a Catholic-Protestant rivalry, because Rangers' two biggest offenders on Wednesday, who seemed to be entirely carried away by the whole atmosphere in the event, were both Muslims. El-Hajj Juf and Mr. Bouguera, who was sent off. Indeed, both of those gentlemen were sent off. So they're Muslims from North Africa, but they seemed to be as into the rivalry, poisonous rivalry between the two teams as any religious bigot could possibly have been. And, as I pointed out on Adrian Durham's show in the week, there are now more Catholics playing for Rangers than there are playing for Celtic. So clearly it's not any longer about religion. But it is a tribal scar across the face of Scottish society. All these years later, the rivalry is becoming more poisonous, rancid, rather than less. It's only a game. Well, not when it's Celtic and Rangers. We'll be talking about that with Ali Dawson, the ex-Rangers and Scotland defender. I'll be explaining just before we talk to him where I stand, and we'll hear where he stands, and we'll hear where you stand if you call me on 08717 223344.